Hello, hello, and welcome. This is Alison Kerr from Empowerment Path, and my guest today is somebody who has been a real guiding force and catalyst for change in my own life. The wonderful Jennifer Main. She is an author, and I've read her book, The Space Between, which she's the queen of boundaries. So for all the highly sensitive people that were not very good at boundaries, really good book. And Jen can give you some information on that. She is a mentor, an initiator, catalyst for change, speaker, and I met her through theta healing. So she has been my theta teacher, and that has been life-changing for me. So welcome, Jennifer. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on.
Thank you so much for having me. What an intro. I appreciate it. Queen of boundaries. I might not accept that one though. It's definitely a work in progress on all those fronts. But yeah, no, thank
Well,
you for having me.
we're always on our journey of improvement, but I don't know anybody else that knows boundaries as well as you do. So I have learned a lot. So Jennifer is a fellow highly sensitive person. And I'll let her tell you a wee bit about her journey at the moment. But one of the things that I haven't really touched on yet, and this is where we're going to start going a wee bit in this conversation, is I have said that I grew up getting told I was too touchy and all of the difficulties that came. And I think it was really only maybe through theta, or maybe just before that, I started learning I was a highly sensitive person. And then, if you've seen any of my previous videos, only last year I started understanding that I'm neurodiverse. And I'm also seeing all around me that many of the healers and teachers and change makers, the rebels, the nonconformists, the creatives are also neurodiverse. So one of the things that I really want to start touching on, we want to help to support the things that are challenging, because they are challenging and it is difficult. But the place that we really want to get to is, what are we here for? What are we capable of? What is our purpose? And I know this is very much part of what Jen likes to share and teach, and she's excellent at it. So I'm seeing that many of the people round about me are neurodiverse, and we do have a purpose. And I think the younger ones that are feeling worthless, that are feeling hopeless, that are feeling not good enough, if we can really get them on this track of believing in themselves, that's been a massive challenge for me, then that in itself can be life-changing. So we're here to change perceptions of neurodiversity, help people to have a bigger understanding of neurodiversity and all that it is and all that it's not. So we'll touch on some of these subjects as we speak. So I'll hand you over to Jennifer first of all. And if you just want to tell us a wee bit about your own journey as a sensitive, first of all.
Yeah, so kind of looking back at my childhood, I can see that I was highly empathic and highly intuitive, and was one of these people that could feel kind of everything that was going on around me. And that felt very confusing because I would have somebody say to me that they were fine or they were good, but I could feel that they weren't. And I was also very overwhelmed as a child because I was so sensitive. Just I didn't want to hug people or be in groups of people. And it wasn't that I didn't like them or love them. It was just, it felt like it was just too much for me to kind of handle. And of course, I didn't have the vocabulary for that or even really the understanding for it. I just knew I didn't want to be around all these people. Um, and so kind of growing up and starting to learn more about kind of empathy, the nervous system, empathic senses, sensitivity has really just helped me to put words and understanding to things that I obviously knew on a deeper level, but struggled to understand as a little human being. And the more I've learned about neurodiversity, specifically ADHD for me, that has just helped to answer a lot of questions, I think. And what it's also really helped me to do is to kind of pick apart things that I thought were me and realize they're not me. So I was telling somebody, a couple of years ago, I was laughing about it. I was like, I thought I had all these funny little personality quirks. It turns out it's kind of disordered processing. But what was great about that was it was kind of this, it kind of helped me to pick apart these aspects of identity where it was like, oh, I do this or I'm like this. But actually, it's like, oh, no, this is part of how my mind works. Now that I understand it's just a part of my processing, it's not a thing I either judge myself for or take ownership of. It's just a thing. And so it's helped me to kind of strip away some of these misconceptions about who I thought I was so I could understand more deeply who I am. So I think a lot of people, I've talked to some people that are really afraid of the labels around neurodiversity, but actually I've found it so actually really liberating and freeing. And, I'm someone who's worked on myself for years. I've, spent lots of time trying to understand who I am, and it just gave another layer of understanding for myself, which has been, yeah, pretty great.
Thank
Sure.
you so much for articulating that so well. This is one of the things that I am also advocating. I've been on my own journey for 30 years too. But if you don't know what you're dealing with, then it's very hard to pick the right tools or the right support. So we've been muddling our way through. And this is why I want to get people like Jennifer on the channel and share our information and what we've been through, because we don't want you to take 10, 20, 30 years. But
Yeah.
yes, the labeling, I see it all the time. And people are saying, oh, but, we don't want our kid onto medication. And I'm not even going to touch on the medication. I'll maybe just touch on it, but not much. But it's not about getting a diagnosis for medication if that's not what you want to do. And if it is what you want to do, then try that. It's the being really understanding yourself at a whole new level, as you've said. And also, as I've mentioned before with my daughter, it was the absolute relief, the delight even of, see, I'm not just clumsy, I'm not just lazy, I do try hard, I don't deliberately run late, I try to be on time, I don't try to forget things and lose things, all of that stuff. And, if you get a diagnosis, you don't need to share that with anyone. That's up to you. And maybe you don't even need a diagnosis. Maybe you just do some of the tests, read some of the books, listen to some of the podcasts. And this is, my daughter learned probably on TikTok. And it was then, Mum, I think I've got ADHD and I think you have too. And that's where it started. And then you learn a wee bit, and the more you learn, the more you think, that's why this and that's why that.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
yeah,
one of the biggest surprises for me was realizing that not everybody thinks or perceives things in the same way. I was like, "Oh, you don't have 83 tabs open in your brain all the time. Oh, okay. Like, no wonder you're approaching this differently than I am." So yeah, I felt it just again, it just clarified so much for me. It made such a difference in understanding myself, but also other people too and how they respond to life. So I think it's worth just researching and reading through and just figuring out yeah, as you're saying, the tools that work best for you
yeah,
is the thing to do.
definitely. And the other thing I'll touch on is, as the numbers of neurodiverse, whether that's just due to more information and more diagnosing, but as there are more and more of us, if we all want to get along and understand each other, then neurotypical people could really do with learning some of this stuff too. We know all about neurotypical people, but the neurotypical people don't fully understand the neurodiverse. And I will say that that still is in schools and different places. I've gone through that journey with my daughter. She wasn't understood and she wasn't believed. That's quite an important thing, feeling as though you're not believed, and people, because they don't understand you, then they actually can outright accuse you of being a liar. How does that make a person feel? And that's when all the guilt and the shame and the layers and layers of all the stuff that we've been working to unpick and heal, that. So if we start off better, then their worlds and their lives are going to be very different, aren't they?
I had a conversation with somebody a few months ago, and she was someone who is involved a lot with interviewing people. And the kind of the debate or the question that was coming up was, should or should not there be kind of dispensations or allowances with people who are neurodiverse, who, if they kind of the idea, if they had an idea of what the questions would be beforehand, could they prepare a little bit better so that they interview better? And it was really interesting to see people's perspectives on that, because all this thing around what's fair and what isn't fair came up, of course. And but then my question at the end was kind of, well, don't you just want to hire the person who's the best fit for the job, not the person who interviews the best? And it kind of was like, oh yeah, that's right. That is what we're going for here. It's not about the interview. It's about finding the best fit within the organization. So I think it's definitely, and anytime the norms or the structures or those things are challenged, people are gonna get nervous, and they're gonna kind of cling to what's been done before, because that's what's been done, so it's fair or right, or whatever those judgments are. So I think it's about kind of leaning into, yeah, the possibility that yeah, there we can adjust, we can evolve, that some space can be created for people who are neurodiverse so that they can work to the best of their abilities, which is the best for the organization, the community, the society, all of those things as well. So it's being able to accommodate people so that we all live as our best. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that, because one of the things that I don't think I've spoken about before is I know I take longer to process information in a conversation, and I
Mm.
still do. And it can be a conversation just with friends, and somebody will say something that's quite important, and I don't respond at the time because my brain's just taking in the information. And then I'll end up going back to them, whether it's a follow-up message or a future conversation. I'll say, listen, I know you shared that and I didn't comment at the time. And it's not because it wasn't important or it wasn't interesting, because it
Right.
was big, but it was
Yes,
just I was thinking and processing.
absolutely.
So, and I suppose that's where it comes into interviews and schooling and instructions from employers and training and all sorts of places, is understanding these differences. And again, this is one of the things that Jen and I just spoke about before we come on. We really want to get people to seeing this more as a difference than a disorder.
Yeah.
There are challenges, but so many of the great people in society, I've been, as I've been doing my continual research, that's one of the things that we're very good at. Because if we find a topic we're interested in, then we will get involved in it. It's just the topics that we're not interested in. It's really, really difficult to try and focus there. But I mean, I've even heard people saying that lots of the great inventors, etc., they're looking back, even biblical characters actually have potentially had neurodiversity. They've displayed lots of the traits. So maybe it's not as new as people think, and it's really about helping people to see the potential, because right now I think there is a certain element that it's a disability. They take up resources in society, dare I say that, and actually see if they can get the support, if we can get the support, then that's going to change everything. And there will be less people in jails, less people on the streets, less people struggling with all of the mental and emotional issues that they're struggling with. And these people will be reaching their potential, finding their area of brilliance, and they'll be not just not a drain on society, they will be highly productive and valuable members of society, because there's a lot of creativity and thinking outside of the box. And this is where I feel the change makers, creatives, maybe we're not here to fit into this society, because we seem to have a real sense of injustice and what's fair and what's not. And we're not scared to speak up for that. And we're not scared to speak up and shake the status quo.
Yeah, I 100%. I think that, if we all are just conforming and if we're all the same, then that's just what we get is the same. And I think as on a higher sense, we're meant to evolve and grow and create. We are all creative beings. And, when they look at, I don't know if you've looked at the studies around kind of the bees, where they look at the bees that go out and explore and find the new places for honey, for resources. That's kind of what's equated with people who have ADHD, is that, or neurodiverse, that is that they're the explorers that will go out, that'll get out of the comfort zone, that are quite happy to move beyond it. But it benefits the whole hive. It benefits everybody because they bring that information back and it's shared within the group. And I think that, depending on, what a person's behavior is and things like that, whether it fits into society or not, we could argue all day with whether that's healthy societal norms or not, because we have a lot of unhealthy societal norms too. But I think it's just kind of recognizing that. I think for myself, I can really look at ways I kind of masked and squashed myself down and hid things away and got really quiet and limited myself because it wasn't what I thought my friends would want, or family, or society, whoever and whatever that is. And so much of that was unconscious for sure. And I think that the more we talk about these things and explore it and recognize it's just another facet of human nature, it's just another facet of behavior, and we stop looking at it as a problem or something that's disordered and something that's just different, as you're saying, then people who are in that different mode of processing, thinking, perceiving can flourish, can evolve, can introduce new ideas. These are the people who are inventive, who are creative, who can get around people are wanting AI to fix our world. Well, let the neurodiverse run free and figure out the answers for us. We don't need AI to do it. So yeah, so I think it's just a lot of it's just changing, as it always is in society. It's always shifting those perception, and it will move along at whatever pace it does. I think we're at a great time right now because there is such a spotlight and people are understanding it more and more. And as you're saying, more and more people are kind of going, oh wait, that's me. I didn't know that was me, but now that explains so much. And now I can understand myself, and I can understand the way I move forward with things, and do it in a way that feels healthy and that feels aligned. And instead of pushing uphill against society or family or norms, I can recognize that maybe there are other people I could connect with and we can do this together. Or maybe it is about me, whether it's changing a job or changing a lifestyle or changing a habit, whatever that is, and kind of being able to move forward with that. So I think it's an exciting time.
Me too. Me too. And this is where we need to get people focusing rather than, oh my goodness, the world's going to shit, you know?
Yeah.
And just one wee point on what you said, I agree wholeheartedly with everything. And that probably relates to the neurotypical to a degree too, keeping ourselves small, keeping ourselves in a box.
Yes.
This, I believe, is part of this shift that we're going through. Part of this evolution that we're going through. It's not just AI that's and technology that's evolving, it's us. And I do think over the last few years in particular, more and more people are opening up. I did say to Jennifer before we came on, I'm starting off with the basics and I'm not really going into the woo-woo yet, but I'm going to start going into the woo-woo because that's what's helped me and that's what's interested me and that's my passion. And it's quite difficult when you're ahead of the curve and learning this stuff when it's not quite the norm yet. And that's what a lot of us are dealing with. But then as people are catching up, things that I was interested in 20 years have now become the norm. And people are opening up more to, and that's one of the things you're very good at teaching as well, helping to expand our consciousness of what is possible.
Yeah, and this is my favorite stuff to talk about too. But yeah, I totally agree. I think as humanity is now in this place of evolving and perhaps more rapidly than we have before. I think people are really, it's this idea that whatever, if there's enough of the population that understands something, it really spreads through the collective consciousness really quickly. So I think that as we are learning how to expand our minds, our hearts, our energy fields, whatever terminology you want to use for that, we're all expanding and growing consciously and unconsciously within that. And so, yeah, it feels like this is an amazing time to start addressing not only the differences between us and humanity, but also where all of this is leading us, if that makes sense. Because I don't think things happen without a reason. I think if this stuff is coming to the forefront of our awareness now, there's a reason for it, and it's meant to help shift us collectively, not just individually.
Yeah. I don't know why this was coming into my head, but I suppose it follows on. So one of the things that maybe not everybody's aware of with ADHDers in particular is we're very good at seeing patterns.
Mm.
We're a rubbish person to watch a film with, because my daughter used to always, I'd be like, all right, okay, so this is going to happen here. And I just thought everybody was like that, because she would say, have you seen this before? But I now understand it's because we can recognize patterns. Maybe this is why we can kind of see more of or have a different view of what's actually going on in the world than the neurotypical.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, my husband and I always joke because the same halfway through or quarter of the way through the film, we'll talk about it. And our joke is we're like, I wrote this. I wrote this film. I already know what's gonna happen. But yeah, that's definitely something I've noticed. And I think that's why what lends it well to the work that I do is that I'm able to make connections that other people don't see and that other people don't make. And so I can take, a tiny point in somebody's life or a tiny issue and kind of see the web that's kind of been woven within the subconscious between, family issues, work, all these different things, because they are all interconnected and interrelated. And so, yeah, being able to, again, sometimes that can feel a little bit like a lot of information, but it's also so useful for being able to understand behavior, understand patterns, understand why people make the same choices over and over and over again, things like that. So that pattern recognition has been hugely helpful. Mhm.
Okay, so before we go on to where we're going, just for parents that are struggling with sensitive children, because we know there just isn't enough support or awareness just now. And as we discussed earlier, although we're giving this advice for your child, many of the mums and dads too, because sensitives are 50% males as well, even if they haven't been aware or recognized it yet. And that's worth talking about because it can be particularly difficult for males in certainly our Western society of big boys don't cry, etc. But mums might be listening to this on how to support. You might not realize that you've got a sensitive child. People don't know what they don't know. So just listening and getting a bit of information, you might think, okay, so my son or my daughter is highly sensitive. And then you can go on a path of learning. Um, or you might think, oh, okay, I'm a highly sensitive person because if you have a highly sensitive or neurodiverse son or daughter, the chances are that you or your partner or their father or whatever are highly sensitive also. And then you might start seeing the patterns in the family going further back, etc., because that seems to be what's going on for us. But as a highly sensitive person, having dealt with it mainly yourself, like I have, what advice would you give to parents really on how best to support their
Yeah.
child, something they
There's,
might not be aware of?
there's kind of two things I would say. I know you've asked for one. I apologize.
That's fine. No, two's great.
The first thing I would say is look at how they might be masking but aren't aware that they're masking. So when I look back at my childhood, what I found myself doing was pulling away. And on one hand, it made me feel like a little weirdo and like an outcast and like I was either being rejected or misunderstood. But a lot of it was because I was pulling back. And part of that was because, again, things felt so overwhelming. I was processing so much at so many levels and just, was trying to do all of that consciously and unconsciously at that time. And so when I got into groups or around certain groups of friends, I would get really quiet and I would just become the observer. And on one level, that was great because I learned a lot, but it meant I wasn't really interacting and I wasn't fully showing up as myself. So I think it's worth just recognizing how your kids are behaving in specific settings and specific groups. I will say on the flip side, when I got into a group where I felt really at home in, like I couldn't shut up. Like I would just talk the whole time because I was really comfortable and excited to share. Um, but yeah, so I find if you're finding that they're shutting down, and if they're getting really tired, especially if in groups or out and about doing things, if they're feeling really tired, really exhausted. I mean, I just remember in school being exhausted all the time and not understanding why. But it was just, yeah, it was because of all the stuff I was processing and going through with the sensitivities. So yeah, so any way that's causing them to shut down physically, emotionally, energetically is something I would look at. And the other thing is looking at how their sensitivity might trigger your stuff. Because, so on the flip side of this is that when I started to understand neurodiversity and ADHD, I understood my mother in a whole new light. And I realized all the stuff that really annoyed me about my mom was ADHD stuff that I also have. And it's also the stuff that annoyed me about me too. So all the stuff I judge myself for, the things I'm so critical about myself for. And so I think, and this happens with everyone. It's, the stuff you judge about yourself, if you see it in others, you get really triggered and frustrated and annoyed. And so if you're struggling with your, I don't know, your attention or your sensitivities and you see your child struggling with that too, it can trigger your stuff with that. Especially if you weren't able to process that or understand that when you were younger. So it's worth looking at where you may be lacking in patience or compassion or getting, frustrated or, or just reacting in ways you don't want to as a parent and kind of going, okay, am I impatient with my child's sensitivities because I also have some of those things that I could look at and I could address too. So I think helping them, support them, but also saying, oh, maybe I have something that I can get some help and support with and be addressed as well, I think is useful for everyone.
Excellent. So this is kind of talking about mirroring,
Mm.
which maybe people that are viewing this won't understand goes on in all of our lives, whether we're neurotypical or neurodiverse. So do you want to just expand on that concept of mirroring a wee bit?
Well, do you know, I have a few different, and maybe I don't have the clearest understanding because I recognize there are some ways that mirroring can be useful, and I've used that as an adult. So I know that if I need to get some work done and I sit down with people who are getting work done, it's much more likely to happen. So I have found ways to use mirroring to help me stay in my seat and get stuff. But I can also recognize where, and for me, this ties in a little bit with when we look at the fight, flight, freeze, there's fawning has been added in. And I can see in times in the past where I've kind of done that, the fawning or the agreeing or the just, I'm going to do what they're doing because it looks like it's supposed to look, or I don't get challenged or I don't get judged if I'm just going along with those things. So that has kind of been my patterning with that. Would you add anything to that, or did you have something different?
No, 100%. I'm glad you brought that up actually, because I've been dealing in my personal life, friendships with highly sensitive friends and coaching them before I was doing it as a job. And it's a repeating pattern with so many of the females in particular. I can't really speak to the guys because I don't have I don't really have the experience in that. But fawning, another word for that really is people pleasing. And there's societal conditioning in here. And then as a neurodiverse, highly empathic, highly intuitive, highly sensitive person, you're knowing if somebody's not really very happy and you don't feel comfortable because you're feeling all their feelings. And so then you're more likely to do what they want to do or give them what they have. And give and take is okay and compromise is okay, but we seem to really just say no to ourselves a lot or all of the time. And then yeah, that's not self-love, is it? And then you lose who you are.
Mhm.
And also to jump back a wee bit as well, what I keep banging on all the time about, find your tribe. Find your tribe. And with kids, don't give them 101 activities necessarily, because in our society, in certain areas, they've got a different activity on every night. And that's what is seen to be the model at the moment and the best thing to do for your children. And I keep saying, you know your child best. So don't overschedule them if they're having overwhelm, if they're seeming exhausted, etc., etc. So really just starting to look at them in a different way. But I think the whole people pleasing, fawning thing is a massive subject, and that fits in with the boundaries as well, doesn't it? Because when we can start shifting that, and it can be really, really difficult for us to start saying no and start saying this. I mean, I'm 57 and I'm still seeing all the places where I could still do better. To say, no, this is what I need, this is what I want, this is what I desire, and I'm worthy of having these things. So it'd be really good to help them to learn this earlier on in life before it means they've had a shit life.
I had this great realization a number of years ago. Someone I worked with. So I used to be really indecisive. And so when a friend or a group would say, well, where do we want to go for lunch? I would always say, oh, I don't care. And I thought that meant I was being flexible and easygoing. And actually, somebody finally spoke up and was like, I hate it when people do that, because then I feel responsible for the whole group. And I feel responsible for the choice and decision because they've just abstained from it. And I was like, that is really interesting and really fascinating. So that kind of shook me a little bit out of that people pleasing, that deferring to others, because I realized it actually wasn't very fair to do that, to make somebody else responsible for my choices. And kind of going into that boundaries aspect of saying no, that's what I learned made the biggest difference, is that whenever people feel overwhelmed, when they don't have enough time, not enough energy, not enough, and they're feeling overwhelmed with all that, the first thing you do is start to say no. And it's starting to look at, well, what are the things that can immediately just go, the things I hate doing, the things I don't want to do, the things that are an obligation, the things that drain me, that feel draining. What can I start to say no to? Because then when you start to have a little bit of freedom of time and spaciousness, then you can start to recognize what better aligns for you and what you really do want to say yes to. But yeah, I do find that so many people are just overwhelmed and burdened with so many obligations, so many things to do, and feel guilty if they're not doing all 800 things at once.
Yeah.
But again, that's kind of that wounding aspect. So it's addressing the wounds within that. So you're not overcorrecting or overcompensating or overdoing to try to prove whatever you're trying to prove or whatever's going on there. Yeah.
Yeah, love that. I had to take a note there because there was one word really stood out that I think is quite important to speak about as well: being responsible.
Mm-hmm.
I think the highly sensitives are overly responsible, and this is why the way we speak to them and correct them or discipline them is really important. Even a tone of voice. My daughter would be like, why are you shouting at me? And I'm like, I'm not shouting at you. Except for when I was less healed, I'd be like, this is shouting, but it wasn't about shouting, it was about tone of voice, and we've had many discussions in the various workshops of taking on the responsibility for the family, taking on the responsibility for, the world. There's a lot of feeling that we are responsible for a lot more than we should as children. So an awareness of, be very careful of what they might be perceiving as their responsibility. That's a tough one. You know, we have these ideas of this is how things should be. This goes back to our own upbringing and programming, but it's shifting. Well, just because that's how I was brought up, did I like that? Was that right? Did that help me? Did that help me to grow into a more balanced human being? Or did it really damage me? And that's when it's kind of shifting the parenting model, and thinking, well, am I making this choice because that's the way it's always been done? And why should you get away with that? Because I had to do this, you know, or, you know, is this going to lead to a much more well-rounded, happy human being, which is basically what we all want for our children.
I know. I mean, I grew up as the oldest sibling, so I've got first child syndrome of you look after your younger siblings and you're responsible for them, which is exhausting. Um, but I think that, yeah, I think that this idea of being responsible for others and trying to, again, even if it's unconscious, trying to unconsciously feel responsible or be responsible for how other people react or respond to you, for how they feel based on however they're perceiving things. I mean, the reality is that, like, I can't make you feel a certain way. I can obviously have an impact on you, have an influence on you, but I can't make you feel a certain way, and you can't make me feel a certain way. And we're trying so hard to essentially control that. We're trying to control ourselves and control each other, and that's exhausting. And part of that is that as people who are sensitive, if you were really upset or grieving something right now, and I could feel that, and it was triggering my own sadness or grief, what usually happens with people is, instead of going, okay, let me tend to my own sadness and grief, which a lot of us don't do because we either don't know how, we don't have the tools, we don't have the support, whatever it is, we go, oh, I need to fix her sadness and grief so that I'm not triggered and I don't feel bad. So we're trying to fix everybody else so that we feel better. And it's nothing of, you can't fix the whole world. Like, you can't fix anything outside of yourself, really. It's this huge illusion, but we think we can do it. So we're trying to control all this stuff to feel better. And as sensitives, it's really kind of saying, okay, well, if I'm just responsible for me, if I'm responsible for my feelings and emotions, if I'm responsible for my actions and reactions, what can I address? What can I heal? What can I look at that's going to help me to feel more collected, more calm, more aligned, so that other people can feel how they feel and I don't feel threatened by that, or I don't feel in danger or scared because of that. And as children, obviously, that's very hard to understand or even articulate in any meaningful way. So I think for a lot of us, as we're growing up and maturing and starting to understand, oh, these are the family patterns, this is the cultural patterns, this is where I fit in with this. What do I need to heal or resolve within myself so that I'm no longer reacting in those same ways and in those same patterns?
Yeah, love it. Thank you. So where are we going now then? Yeah, do you want to share? I've shared a wee bit about, I believe that we are evolving, we're changing, we're going through a really big shift. I believe that the neurodiverse are definitely here to be a part of that. You're very much here at the forefront. And the idea here is that we want to be raising awareness, advocating, learning how to understand each other better, helping to support the differences and the challenges, but also, what is the potential?
Oh my gosh, what a question.
Or an easier question
Yeah,
is,
well, no,
so yeah,
I could maybe answer that question. We can,
okay, go.
I've got an idea.
Good.
So for me, it really comes down to, and it's kind of this, there's the ebb and the flow with it, or maybe the pendulum swing. I think it's about each of us really investing in ourselves in terms of time, energy, resources to understand ourselves better. And if that's a healing journey, if that's education, if that's, I don't know, whatever, travel, whatever it is that helps us to awaken and grow and evolve, we allow ourselves to have those experiences. I think the other side of that is also that we create cultures, whether that's in schools, in jobs, or just in conversations with friends and family, but we create cultures where people can share this stuff and talk about these things. and where we can talk about our differences in a way that's supportive and open, and there's a curiosity and a willingness to listen to it. Because as we were saying at the beginning, if we're all just trying to be the same, then nothing evolves, nothing changes. So I think that if the more we, I was having this conversation a couple of days ago actually about the differences between like the generations and things like that, and just this again, this idea that if we stay fixed on this notion of, well, this is how it's done, this is how it's been done, then that creates needs to rebel, fight, conflict, drama. It just creates difficulties. Whereas if we can look at it as an evolution, and actually our elders are, we have these sages that have all this wisdom for us and for these younger generations. We don't want to lose that, but also if it's something that it feels constrictive and limiting, then that's where the fighting comes. So it's really kind of looking at how do we glean the best from each generation, from each group, and how do we share that as we go along and recognize that we're all in this together. That sounds very like silly, like we are the world, but it is recognizing that we have to do all this together. Because if we're fighting with each other, then we'll just keep perpetuating the same fights and the same dramas and the same themes over and over and over again. Yeah, yeah. So having the time and space to do the work ourselves, but then also share that wisdom and guidance with those around us. Hopefully that answered that question.
Thank you very much. What would you say has helped you the most? Tell us a wee bit about your own healing journey, your expansion, your evolution.
I think a couple things, and they, for me, they go together. Having a meditation practice has been huge for me. And I know as someone with ADHD, to talk about sitting still for an hour, you can work up to that. But that I think has made such a massive difference in how not only how I respond to the world, but also how I feel within myself, because it's helped me to reconnect with myself. I think it was very dissociate before. And it's helped me to understand myself better, which then helps you, because if you know yourself better, you're more confident, you know your path, you know your choices, and so you can show up more authentically as you. And yeah, and it just has this huge knock-on effect. I think what also has helped me is really understanding my thought processes and my emotions and how they motivate things. And obviously, you can be motivated or inspired to do really great things. Sometimes your thought processes may not do that for you. So, learning how to resolve some of those old thinking patterns and just really the automatic stuff. So the automatic assumptions I had about life. Like I can really look back before I kind of got on my healing and consciousness journey. I really was just following my ancestral line. And don't get me wrong, there's some amazing things in my ancestral line, but there were also some really unhealthy kind of perspectives about how, you have to work so hard and it's got to be, life's just really difficult and you just got to slog through it. And I was kind of doing that. And so, yeah, so just kind of being able to start to question some of that stuff and go, actually, I can see that that's come before, but is that how I want to carry on? Is that what I want to continue with? So, yeah, so just having those times to really question those things and say what actually is the choice that I want to take here. And I've done that through different kind of classes and courses, but also conversations with people around me, listening to great podcasts and shows and things like that. So yeah, I would say follow your intuition in terms of your own consciousness and what's going to help you to yeah, take the step that's best for you. And just take it a step at a time. Like people think that they've got to dive in the deep end and they got to change their life in a week. I mean, do that if you want, but ooh, that's intense. So yeah, so I think it's recognizing that a lot of this is a journey and it's okay to just take some time and just integrate and embody the things that you're learning as well. And let it be a journey that you enjoy too. If it's something that you're suffering through, that you're pushing through, it may not be the way. And there's so many different modalities and philosophies and ways of thinking and ways of, being, that you can find one that works for you. So if yoga doesn't work for you, if silent meditation retreats don't work for you, if, whatever, find what does. I think that's the big thing.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. Yeah, and I just scribbled down failing and perfectionism when you're saying just try things. So this is something that's very common as well, isn't it, with the highly sensitives? It's maybe, I don't know where it comes from. Is it because we're not the same and some things weren't so easy and we've had lots of tailing off? So I understand if you're neurodiverse, you hear no, you get corrected an awful lot more. So that has an impact. And then it can get to the stage where you are scared to even try anything. But I can totally resonate with that. And that's where the healing comes in and having a mentor, having a mentor, that gets me on to point out the good things about your child, point out what they're good at. Even now, I will have a friend, and this is where having that community and having the like-minded people, and somebody says, you're really good at such and such. And I'm like, oh, am I? Thank you. And at 57, I still need to hear that because I didn't actually realize that. So some of the things that, and this goes for everybody in society, point out to people what you appreciate about them, what you value about them, what's important to you in your relationship. That really fosters deeper connections as well, doesn't it?
In my past jobs, I was always asked to be the one that trains the new people, or to train, or to, I also had a job where I was the only one that could stay on top of my caseload. And my manager basically was like, how do you do this? So I had to figure out what I was doing. The ADHD actually helps. But I never would have been. So now I'm a teacher, I'm an instructor, I'm a public speaker. I never would have assumed that about myself 20 years ago, except that I kind of recognized that, oh yeah, people keep asking me to teach. They keep asking me to speak. Maybe there's something in this. So having those people do that really helped me to grow in confidence. I would not have volunteered for that at all in those years. And something I was looking at, I've been reading more about, so interesting you bring this up. So the last 6 months or so, I've really been looking at shame. And I kind of thought it was one of those things where I was like, oh, I don't really feel like I have too much to delve into with that. And then I got into it and went, oh my gosh, I just didn't even know, forgotten about all these things in my childhood, all these things. Again, and it's all that self-blame. It's being so critical. And I've also been reading a little bit about rejection sensitivity within neurodiversity. And oh my gosh, that just made so much sense for me. And it's, as you're saying, is that somebody can say something either as a joke or something dismissive they're not even thinking about. And also I can look back at childhood where a teacher has said something to me and they may have just made one little comment, but I feel like it tore me apart. I just took it so seriously. And instead of it being about my behavior, it felt like it was about me as a person. And it was so deep and painful and hurtful. And so being able to recognize that, oh, okay, some of this is just me being very sensitive to this, and maybe it isn't meant the way I'm interpreting it or have received it in the past. And it's also because it's just triggering all this old shame, which needs to be kind of processed and understood and dealt with. So I'm kind of working with those two things together. But yeah, that's just made such a difference over the last couple months, just recognizing that connection there.
Yeah, and how that can show up. So sports at school, one of the things, and but I didn't have this because I was great at sports at school. It was one of the things I excelled at, so it wasn't an issue for me. And actually, my daughter is also good at sports, but didn't really give herself the opportunity. This is where not wanting to go up in front of the class, rounders, for example. Oh my God, everybody's going to be looking at me. I have all this responsibility, or I won't get picked. That's a rejection. There's so many wee places that are a rejection, and to make you understand just how big this is, I'm glad you touched, I'd written down guilt and shame and we didn't go there. A really important thing is to be very clear in your communication about, it's not you are bad or you are wrong. And I've learned this and I've verbalized it with my daughter, it's about, let them know it's your behavior. It's not you. It's this particular behavior that you're doing right now. It's not you, because all of these things that we're talking about, they're not going to verbalize this to you. This is all the stuff that we keep in internally. And this leads into the perfectionism of, if I do everything perfectly, then I'm not going to feel these disgusting feelings, these really overwhelming. Embarrassment is a feeling that I cannot stand. I think so. When you think about the neurodiverse and the highly sensitive, we feel everything that you feel, we just feel it more, so the good feelings we feel more and it's great, but the heavier feelings, we're feeling them even more as well, and that can be really hard.
So I think what I'm just realizing this, I'm so glad we're talking about this. One of the things that helped kind of break me out of that was going to university in a place where I knew very few people. And then after I graduated from uni, I traveled around Europe for 4.5 months. So by being one of those bees that went outside of the hive and created my own life, my own identity, my own way of living, by following that neurodiverse way of thinking, that has healed and resolved a lot of my childhood stuff. And so I don't get, I mean, I would still say I lean introvert. I'm more ambivert. But the things that I would have really struggled to do, I can do now because I don't get so embarrassed. I don't do all those things. So actually, by being me and neurodiverse, it's resolved a lot of those internal things, which is just super cool.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just having such a realization, and I did want to get on to where I think we're going is being more of ourselves and feeling safe. All of us, to get out the box. This is where we're going to find the problems to find the solutions for the world problems. It's not in the box, but just what you're talking about. At the age of 30, nearly 31, I went traveling to Australia for a year. And see, when people talk about finding themselves, that's what I did exactly. That was me. Nobody knew me. I wasn't this person's wee sister. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't anything. And that's where I could just be me. Oh, and people quite like me when I'm just being me. So that is definitely that. Wow. That was just a mind blow moment. So 100%, that was life changing for me, as much as being in the community of the people that get you, and then you realize there's not really anything wrong. So time is flying by. Before we kind of bring this to a close, please tell people where you're at, what you're doing, what your offerings are, because the one thing I will say, as Jennifer said, try lots of things. I've had many teachers, I've read many books, I've gone to many courses, and it's not always about, with ADHDers in particular, I'll book onto a workshop and I don't even know what it's about sometimes, but I got the call. It seemed exciting. This is the impulsivity, and let them follow that, and try things. And if it's not the right thing, then you can stop. And the ADHDers often do. And that's not, it's like, nah, this isn't what I thought it was. And that's not always bad, because some people stick with a university course right to the end, and they've known at the beginning that it wasn't for them. But yeah, over to you. What are your offerings and where are you going just
Such a good
now?
question. So yeah, you can find me at withjennifer.com, and I'm with Jennifer 44 on most social media platforms.
And
Yeah, so
I will share your links below
thank
the video, obviously.
thank you. Yeah, so I So right now I'm serving as an initiator and a mentor, mentoring really for other healing practitioners, coaches, spiritual teachers, and essentially who I wish I'd had 15 years ago when I first got started with all this. So, I was taking some great courses and things like that, but felt like I needed a bit of help figuring out what could come next, how I could hone my gifts and skills, what I could be studying and learning and things like that in the meantime, and just so I could show up and have more impact with clients and things. So this is the work I'm doing right now with people and really, really loving. And I'm also a healer and an initiator at heart. So really what I do is I create events and hold spaces for people. So kind of as Allison's saying, it's that figuring out your strengths, figuring out your path. What is it that I'm here to do? What am I here to be? We all know that on some level, but I think we really saw this with COVID lockdowns and things. It's recognizing that we're meant to bear witness to each other, and we're meant to have these experiences together with our tribe, with our group, and yeah, and finding those people to help share that and express that with. So that's a lot of the work that I'm doing right now. So looking at turning wounds into wisdom, becoming the elder, becoming the sage, and really understanding what it is to understand your empathic, your intuitive gifts, because that's been a lot of my journey over the years as well. Yeah. So if any of that resonates, please feel free to be in touch.
I love that. Yeah, because we learn. So when the younger ones are struggling, I do feel as though kind of the first part of your life, you're getting all the wounding. And then you get to a certain stage, like my daughter's 18. She's not interested really in getting into, I'm teaching her bits. And as we learn about the neurodiversity and ADHD, that compassion, the understanding, the being less judgmental, less hard on ourselves, that's all coming. She's not really interested in all the tools that I have, and I'm not going to push them on her. But as we are getting older and we understand, I didn't go through all of that shit for nothing.
Yes.
When you start to see all the things that you've learned, that really helps you to get out of the victim and out of the resentment and out of the unworthiness and the oh poor me and all that kind of stuff, and starts getting us into our power, as we say. And we want more joy on the planet. Life has been difficult. I want life to be easier. We all want life to be easier. So, if we can kind of create these structures, these communities, get better support in place, get people to find their passion, their purpose, this is how we start creating a happier, more joyful world, because who doesn't want more joy and more peace, and more connection?
I think the big thing for me is that, we want world peace. So that starts within. Like we have to be peaceful within ourselves, and then we become the presence of peace. And other people can tap into that and tune into that, and they feel more at peace and they respond more peacefully. So we can have that ripple effect. And we won't always know how far that goes. But if we start with ourselves and just sharing that with those around us, then that's what gets created in the world. And going back to what you were saying about kind of the following your intuition with courses and things like that, 100%. My kind of healing consciousness journey has totally just been about following my intuition and saying what feels aligned, what feels so exciting and interesting, what am I curious about, what do I just really want to learn about, just for the fun of it, not because it's going to give me a certificate or whatever, but just seems so interesting that I'm going to grow from it. I'm going to evolve from it. It's going to be something cool for me to just experience. And I think with ADHD, that connection to intuition, or neurodiversity, that connection to intuition is there. So really just allowing yourself to go with that and trust that if you follow it, it's going to take you in the right direction. And you may have a few, back and forth along the way, but but just keep playing with that and practicing it. It gets stronger, it gets easier. Yeah, that would be for sure my bit of advice, is
Yeah.
following that.
Yeah, and it's all experience.
Mm,
So, yeah, definitely, we don't want to dampen the curiosity. We
yeah,
want to be curious. We want to be exuberant. We want to be excited.
yes.
I've had people try and shut that down in me many times. And I'm like, no, let me be excited. Why can I not be excited? Life is hard. So when life is exciting, let me be excited, because there's a lot of suppression. That's the masking. There's a lot of suppression of the exuberance and the excitement and the curiosity, as well as, the heavier things. So it's about learning to feel safe to actually express ourselves fully, and follow our passion and our joy and our purpose. And how different will life be? I'm excited.
Yes, amen.
Any final words before we sign off?
No, just thank you again. That was a great conversation. I've gotten a
Yeah.
lot from it myself, so I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, I'll be in touch. I still love connecting, and yeah, hearing all the evolution and still learning from you. So thank you
Pleasure.
so much, and bye for now.